Hello, everyone. I'm Tanys Coughlan, and I'm super excited to have this conversation today between Sylvain Rochon of the Alliance for Extraterrestrial Diplomatic Contact and Brian Ruhe from University Galacticus. So there's a lot of common ground between both organizations, and we're just going to have a conversation today about that common ground and the common goals and objectives. So Brian, why don't you start and let us know exactly what University Galacticus is about?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. Well, University Galacticus, we started a while ago. I could actually just do a quick share screen here. This is our growing website. We're just developing it now. This is our logo. Actually, get a closer look at our logo here. We've just perfected it. But we got 5 main objectives. So this sort of briefly focuses in. The first is to prepare people for contact with non-human intelligence, both physical and non-physical, aiming to dial down fear of extraterrestrial visitation interaction. I won't read them all. We're also concerned about, why are ETs here, understanding them. And in terms of just diplomacy, I think one thing we have in common with, the Alliance for Extraterrestrial Diplomatic Contact is we're concerned about diplomacy with human beings, because human beings have a fear of ET or a prejudice or a fear of the unknown. So it's a process of trying to introduce people to non-human intelligence in a way to dial down fear, reduce fear. So what I like about, Sylvain's Alliance is you've been at this for 50 years, the idea of extraterrestrials and introducing them to humanity. So I thought, yeah, it'd be good to do a video together, to talk about the 2 different organizations.
Right, because both of you are the founders of these organizations, right?
Yeah.
So then what about the Alliance? How about you tell us about your mission?
Yeah, the Alliance for Extraterrestrial Diplomatic Contact was founded in 2021 officially, but it was thought of just in 2020. So it's a very young organization. But the idea of creating an official ET embassy, which is our primary mission, primary goal, dates back to 1974. It's carried by an organization called the International Raelian Movement back then up until the present. What we've done with the Alliance, we wanted to bring this wonderful idea to the world, right? So the Alliance basically is the network of organizations and their supporters that want to have this official meeting with ETs or non-human intelligences, if you want to think a bit broader, in an official embassy. So actually constructing an embassy according to the Vienna Convention rules of 1961 in extraterritorial space, in a location inside a nation. That is the stated goal. However, we do carry on 2 other main goals or secondary goals that are very important to the accomplishment of the embassy. And one of them is to establish more love and peace on the planet. And the other is to promote truth about non-human intelligence, ETs, UFOs, UAPs, the disclosure movement and all this stuff. So we're encouraging the organization. The Alliance itself doesn't do activities directly along those 2 secondary lines, but we, in the network, many organizations do. So we support each other to elevate those 3 purposes through collaboration. So that's why we're here. And University Galacticus is a happy partner to us because we're so aligned in facilitating that idea of contact, peaceful. And to his point, one of the reasons why we're focusing on the love and the truth is and also building the embassy, which needs the collaboration of nations, is to make sure that we don't, kill each other for the privilege.
That would be good. Let's not do that.
So long as the rules, understanding before, the spaceship, appears in the sky for all to see in the media to photograph. So it's a big mission carried by multiple organizations, not just us 2. We've identified others that have similar ideologies, which is why the network is important.
And I think it's important to mention that despite the political nature of the Alliance work with the UN and stuff, it's very nonpartisan in terms of it's really about unity and peace,
Yeah.
right? For all. So I think that's important to
Yeah,
bring forward.
we don't engage in politics or religion.
Yes. Exactly.
We're neutral at that point. Just this getting everybody unified in all the variety that they are into this singular purpose of bringing humanity to a next level, to where we have contact with, official contact with extraterrestrial beings. So very interesting times.
Mm-hmm. And I think with the University Galacticus, what is your subject matter going to focus on then in terms of diplomacy? Are you going to be doing teaching on that?
Yeah, and it actually, I want to comment on the two values, secondary values of love and truth in terms of diplomacy. We think of spiritual development of humanity. It's sort of another way of expressing love. Humanity needs more love, but I think from a ET perspective, I think at least the evidence I've seen from experiences, the ETs want us to develop our spirituality. That's kind of what's holding humanity back, and kind of like in terms of their contact with us, or diplomatic contact, they're kind of holding back. It's kind of like they want us to develop spiritually. Maybe they're helping behind the scenes. And truth, of course, yeah, we're looking for truth about the truth of UFOs, gradual disclosure. Yeah, so diplomacy includes that, trying to get those ideas through to the population, like getting the idea out there, that we have to develop ourselves spiritually, like we have to, care, love is a kind of a general thing, but whatever spiritual development is, without having to align with one particular religion as well. We don't have any particular religious affiliation.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say about those people? Because of course in the media, the ETs have been painted as not so nice, and we know that that's not the case. So what are your views on that in terms of how you would broach that topic?
Yeah, I think the media has an agenda, at least the mainstream media has had an agenda against the aliens, it seems, since the 1950 B movies and movies like Independence Day. And the evidence from experiences, like I often quote there's a large-scale study by the Constant Contact Research Institute. They published their third volume just recently of A Greater Reality. And they've surveyed over 4,300 experiencers, and 80% have had positive experiences. 50% have actually had like physical healings, good transformational experiences, more of a spiritual inclination towards their life. So the evidence actually contradicts the stereotypical media view. And even within the the UFO community, there's still a negative feeling towards ETs, or a negative impression of the gray ETs. And it seems they're the most common ones seen. And yet people often are shocked initially in their relationship, but they find over time they're not being harmed and they actually have a beneficial relationship. So over time, most of these experiencers, some right from the beginning, have had good experiences with the grays, but it seems there is a deliberate sort of concerted negative campaign against the grays and other ETs. So how to counteract this? I guess we'll just have to add our voices and look at the evidence, like large-scale studies.
Well, and Sylvain, you and I were talking once about that, and how we would know if they were not wanting us around. Right?
Well, yes, and this and for background, I have a scientific background, so I tend to think like a scientist. So usually logical reasoning, and following a lot of the astrophysics. And I even wrote an article, I think in 2019, about the subject, about why an ET civilization would attack Earth, right? Just like reasoning it out. And the conclusion of it is it's not a non-zero. It's a non-zero possibility. It's not entirely impossible. But the possibilities, the logical possibilities would be if they have some kind of religion that would force their mindsets and to I don't know, eliminate other inferior species or whatever it be, like make some bigots, or they're just like really, really mean to others. Because religion sometimes makes people do things that would be non-logical, out of belief instead of rationality. But there's no rational reason. Because the resources are abundant in the universe and they can travel the stars Earth is not special resource-wise. And there are humanities and organisms everywhere. And we're terrible slaves. Like if you pick up that idea that it would come here to enslave us for some reason, like we're terrible at it, and we'd resist. So they can make robots, we can make robots. Like why would they have humans as in the way? So with the infinite universe available, there's no reason for them to come here except for curiosity. Maybe it's scientific, or maybe there is a reason that is a bit more close to their heart, why they're coming here and why they're so interested in this particular planet. It's not because of the water or the gold in the hills. It's because there's a relationship between us and them. There's history.
Yeah.
And that's where you can see a lot of the ancient, Eric von Däniken is one of the earlier, like really popular researchers in that field. And there's a bunch of other researchers that follow him to see like, oh, there's signs that ETs were here for a long time and interacting with humanity, even having children. There's a lot of signs that they've been some crossbreeding and so on and so on. And even creationism, not a god, but ETs with science creating life, just like we're about to do ourselves. So, if they're 1,000 years or more ahead of us, they can certainly do that. So it's what do we see? What normal people see, right, is what is in the media. Like to your point, Brian, right? In the media, Hollywood, and from government types or military types, like some declarations in the news and things like that. These three organizations or groups have their own missions and purposes. Hollywood just cares about making money. So whatever sells, they'll make. So if ETs, being the scary guys, the bad guys, sells, then, and they've been making a bank on that concept. Independence Day was mentioned, and there's a bunch of others. It sells tickets. Okay, that's it. If the mindsets of people want to see ETs as benevolent, and there has been some very famous movies about that. The Arrival is a more recent one that's along those lines, where there's benevolence or communication helping. E.T. is one of the Spielberg's famous movies that was a very outside of the box back then, alongside The War of the Worlds and other movies that were terrible. Yeah. So if people feel like that's what they want to see, Hollywood's going to produce movies that are along those lines. And they are, like Contact is another one. And now Avatar. We're seeing a bit of following Avatar. Yeah. You root for the aliens. Right? So people are interested in that. Well, Hollywood's going to produce. Media is also a money-making machine. News are not there to produce news anymore. It is a business to generate cash. It's not a public service like it used to, right? It used to be, if it's a public service, then their mission, it doesn't matter if they lose money, their mission is to generate news. News are profitable business, for-profit businesses nowadays. So they, just like Hollywood, will elevate the news that will sell. So they'll follow public opinion, okay? Then there's policymakers and the military. I put them in the same bucket. They tend to rotate around the national security conundrum. We need to keep things secret. We need to know what those are, and kind of to protect ourselves. That's the attitude. And that is really hard for these individuals, especially military folk, to get out of, because that's their job, is to secure. So I don't blame them into thinking about, I don't understand this, and how can we protect ourselves? Because that's their whole job, is to protect a nation. So of course they're going to think that way. They're not bad people. Their intentions are good. But the messaging from them to the rest of the population is, oh, we have to protect ourselves, right? So I think, to Brian's point, for all of these groups, including the politicians, because they follow public opinion, is to change public opinion. Mm-hmm. If ETs become a cool, another movie, Paul, which is incredibly funny. If we want more of that, we want to see ETs as our brothers or sisters, as comedians, as interesting futures for humanity, Gene Roddenberry, in Star Trek, for example. If we want to see more of that, politicians will align to that. The military will still be on its own vision, but they'll be, they're going to be a little bit more relaxed, maybe because they are people, they have families and so on. And Hollywood is going to produce whatever we want. So the grassroots effort into changing people's minds about existence of ETs and whether or not, why would they be here? That's an education effort. So university, like University Galacticus and others, are positioned to develop a general population consumption material that is aligned with a new vision, new way of seeing things, educating them, but also developing potentially more professors and educators that can propagate the ideology further down the road. And that changes attitudes in the population, and therefore it has a domino effect of changing everything that we consume and see. And then we all of a sudden you start bathing with conversations at dinner about how it would be cool to have an ET at the table, instead of like, oh, what would we do? Would we hide under the table if they arrive? So you change the whole ideology.
Yeah, I think you're right, Sylvain. I think education and exposure to the language around it is certainly key, and that's something that both of your organizations take part in your different ways. So how would University Galacticus be moving forward with that kind of education for the public?
Well, we would talk about why they're here. Of course, we don't know for sure. I don't think anyone can say for sure unless the secret government does know. But we can entertain various hypotheses. But I think there's a benevolent why they're here. And like Sylvain was saying, we could be their brothers or descendants of some kind. Like genetically, we may be their descendants. There seems to be evidence for that, even ancient evidence as well. So, yeah, my own hypothesis is, well, I know quotes like, say, Linda Moulton Howe. She gets a lot of insiders. She had a defense intelligence agency analyst who was retiring in 1999. She spent 7 hours with him, and she couldn't record him. But he was saying that all questions of human origins have been answered, and that book is closed. And from what he was saying is that from already evolving primates, humanity was developed by the ATs, genetically developed. So it might have been something like that. So I think my theory, based upon people I've interviewed and people I've studied, is they sort of came back in the 1800s of some kind. Like, of course, they've come and gone. They've probably been here, people say, forever. But I think they got more involved in the 1800s, it seems, with this ET abduction program, or people getting involved with the genetics, taking sperm, and they seem to be developing humanity, trying to create perhaps a better version of humanity, and introducing this gradually, perhaps over centuries. At least they're working behind the scenes, like with these great motherships. Like in our logo here, we have a depiction of one of these 200-mile across motherships. And there's been evidence since the 1950s of various sources about this. That's sort of a whole other conversation. But experiences have recorded being in these lecture halls, like 200 or 250 holds 250 people. And there's a series of them. And they're brought on in real time, a couple of hours, and it's very well organized, like clockwork. And they're giving, and a lot of these people are like leaders in society, or scientists, or engineers, or inventors, and they're giving impressions and ideas put into their subconscious mind, or thought packages. And then they're brought back, and they don't have a conscious memory of this, but it kind of bubbles up. And so if you consider what has happened since the mid 1800s, all the inventions and all the progress we've had, and social changes as well. So this is one hypothesis. Well, maybe the ETs are behind this, because we were just at a level of horses and buggies for like 1,000 years, 2,000 years, until 1800s, and then we really took off. So are these benevolent BTs behind this? And then it gets very philosophical, like why is there still all these wars and conflicts? You could explain that as well. This is the realm we live in. We're not in this heavenly realm, and perhaps it's our karma. We live in this world. That's a whole other question. But that's kind of addressing the why that they're here, and looking at different views. So With the University of Galacticus, we want to invite experts in a variety of fields to discuss, their evidence, their hypothesis, or why they think, rather than just promoting one particular view.
And I think this is a beautiful discussion in how we're marrying the spiritual with the scientific as well. As, Brian, your background as a monk, and Sylvain, yours as an engineer or scientist. I think that the two views bring an interesting blend to the conversation.
Yeah, I find that in my meetups, we have these sometimes these long meetup conversations. After an hour or two, it becomes like a spiritual conversation of like 15 people on a Zoom, and then towards the end, it just becomes a whole spiritual, philosophical conversation. It's not just about UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because it's kind of like going back in time in a way. Let me explain. In the old philosophers, Aristotle and Archimedes, and like from the Greek ancestry, like a long time ago, 2000 plus years ago, they were the scientists of the day, but it was philosophical, sociological, some biology, because they were dealing with what they were observing around them, and that is the attitude of a scientist: curiosity about how and why things work and all that stuff. So it was called philosophy. So all the sciences, including spirituality, was melded into one, right? Trying to understand the universe, including who we are and our purpose and all that stuff. And over time, yeah, there was segregation of all these disciplines, and spirituality was one side because it's too fluffy. There's no measurement, right? It's kind of like just on the side, it's ideas. And so the philosophers would go and talk about spirituality, and the spiritualists also, and the scientists had all these branches, like measuring stuff and organizing stuff. And for about 100 years, it's not a short amount of time, when we just started looking at quantum physics. And so the science of the very, very small, so inside the atom, right? In particular, these scientists, but other scientists started to become philosophers again and started talking about the spiritual.
Yeah.
Not in the sense of like finding God in that sense. No, spirituality in a broad sense, like about questioning the universe and its sentience and our connection to it, because they saw in the quantum level that there was inherent physical calculatable connection that explains in some ways spiritual occurrences and so on. So a lot of scientists have become spiritualists in their own way. Right, it's a different type of spirituality. It's still about understanding, but also tying the signs that they're observing to actual spirituality and explaining some of the discussions and phenomena that we speak usually in the spiritual circles. Because I think that's probably true. Like what we feel is spiritual experiences and connectedness to the universe and like ideas like that is in fact measurable. And calculatable. We're just getting to understand that the science is kind of catching up in how all this stuff is actually, how we're all connected with each other, how the universe is actually within us and we are part of the universe, and these things, we can observe this. And if you go down to a theory we call like string theory, and these are all theories, like because it's so small, we can't really decide whether it's really like that or not, but there's prevailing theories that most people kind of lean towards. And string theory, if you go down to like as small as you can get, as small as you can conceive in the math, the universe looks exactly the same. Whether it's empty space or inside your own body, it looks exactly the same. So it brings us to that idea of not being that unique. We are made of each other and we are part of each other. We are stardust, star stuff, ether stuff. And we just happen to be, to interact with each other in a certain way at the macro level. but we're made of the same things. So we're in the same class. We're not different after all. We're different forms of something that is very similar. And one last point on that is just on a more like at a larger scale than the quantum. If you look into the observable universe, like we can only really look into our galaxy and some of the atom, knowing the composition of atoms and through telescopes, but especially this particular galaxy and a bunch of other galaxies around us. We know that the most abundant atoms that are reactive, right, are hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen. Okay, about 99% plus of the matter of the reactive, because there's also helium, but in the galaxy, but the reactive atoms are those four. 99% of the galaxy is made out of those four things, excluding the helium, of course. Living creatures like us, 99%, those four atoms as well. So that's interesting to understand. You don't need to go into the weirdness of quantum mechanics. So just look at our own matter. We are representing the galaxy in our own physical selves.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about that we are all one. And really, if we are all one, you know, when we don't have peace, we're fighting with ourselves.
That's right.
So education and bringing that type of concept forward is part of both of the organizations, I would think, your mandates in terms of creating that understanding of being all one and creating that harmony and love.
Right. If I can jump on that too, Tanys, quickly.
Yeah.
Trying to get an understanding into people's minds that differences are okay. Right? It's actually a pretty hard thing to do because we are programmed to be fear-based, and fearing the unknown or the different is kind of built into the biology, the survival instincts, right, that we have. So it's, you have to build your consciousness and your awareness to go against the primal brain, let's call it that. And the only way to fight that is through communication and understanding and interaction. So if you interact, like take an example, a simple example, because I come from a small town and so does Brian. Okay.
Small town, Ontario.
Right. So and this is a pure example. Okay. My small village outside of Ottawa, Canada, all French, all white. Okay. It's Eastern Ontario. If you're not familiar with it, it's near Quebec and Montreal. Everybody's French. And it's country folk and it's farmers. They don't go out a lot. And especially in the past, there was TV, but you know, there's not a lot of internet and so on. But they don't tend to be very technological. They tend to, you know, tend the fields and be very simple folk. They're country folk. So when I was living there, that was the way it was. And there was like this small corner store that everybody went to, because it's a small village, like less than 1,000 people, owned by this white man for ages. I was there, the center of the town. Many years later, after I finished university, I go back and I visit the spots. I have to go to the corner store because that's the center of town in that village. I go in there and I see Black English folk tending the corner store. I said, huh, where's Mr. Pilon? Like, because I'm expecting to meet him, right? And he's in the back being a butcher, right? So he's there. So I said, why are these people here? Like, where did they come from? Like, what happened to the store? So I asked them, and they can't speak French. They speak English to me. So no problem. They bought, and because he was getting old, and you know, they bought it. They moved into the countryside. They thought it was a great idea. But they explained to me that most of the people of the village don't come shop there anymore because they don't speak English very well, and they're Black. It's not because they're bad people. It's because they haven't encountered directly Black folk. Especially the young people don't mind, but the older people, they're afraid. They don't know. Like, it's not Mr. Pilot now at the door anymore. It's this Black English person. It's the simplest thing sometimes, and those little bits of experiences create wars at a macro scale. A whole population can be told, these people are different because the skin color or something like that, or the language or the religion or whatever it could be. They're on the other side of the river. We don't know them. And because we don't know them, they're dangerous. They're a risk. They're a security risk or some kind. So maybe we need to do something about that. And you can get the population to agree out of fear. So the solution to all that, of course, is to, well, have them mingle. Because that family of Black Anglophones, they were from Somalia. They were very nice. Like, I had a very lovely conversation. A few years later, I learned that the village were quite fine with them. It took a while, but they thought nothing happened, not scary. And apparently Black folk can be nice too. And they're like us. Okay. Yeah. So the age of the internet helps in getting all sorts of people kind of mingling together, in virtually and otherwise. That helps with differences. Because what happens when we have an ET coming down with?
Yeah.
They'll be pretty different. Okay.
They will.
And they'll be sensitive to that because I'm sure they'll have histories too.
Yes.
They'll know this dynamic, and they'll be observing us fighting over skin color and philosophies or whatever. But the work is for us to mix ideas, to share, to get to know each other, the different ideas, and not unifying individuals and groups into a single idiom. No, we're 8 billion people. We should have 8 billion individuals that are absolutely different, and be comfortable with every one of us, because differences is not scary. And
each person has a beautiful heart, and that's
right. Just see
that, and the cellular level we share, right?
share, yeah. Not see gender, just like sentience at the higher level is like, these are sentience. It allows us as a population to interact with ETs because different doesn't matter. It's okay. We're all part of the same universe. It's this person is me. But I don't know that variation of me. So I can approach and discover that. That is an attitude that can come out of understanding and being comfortable with differences. So if you get people to mix, we'll get there. So again, education. It always goes back to teaching and getting people engaged.
So bringing that stuff to the awareness of the collective, bringing it forward, through doing things like University Galacticus, and having those classes available for people if they're open to be participating. Yeah. And how would you make those choices as Dean, Brian, for the University Galacticus in terms of enrollment in classes and stuff? Is it just an openness to know?
Yeah, I guess that's partly up to the experts we bring in, because we want them to help guide the curriculum. I guess I'm sort of a essential point of that. So we'll see what develops out of that. But I was kind of inspired by what Sylvain was saying about particles, at the smallest levels of particles. I know, like a century ago, physicists like Max Planck, they're studying the Upanishads and ancient Indian Vedas because they're trying to get some spiritual appreciation about what's the nature of reality. So I think this is what we're really discussing, is what's the actual nature of reality. And I didn't know this about the hydrogen and oxygen and carbon. If it's like 99%, just shows the commonality we have with all beings everywhere in the universe. If that's the nature of the universe and that's what we're made of, that's a great example, whether you're black or white or whatever. The carbon and the oxygen, hydrogen, That's very good. And
Well,
now I was thinking, go ahead.
Just a little thing, there's a high probability, in fact, that any other life out there could be carbon-based. In part because of the abundance of carbon, but also carbon is the atom that has the most combinatorial possibilities to make molecules in the whole periodic table. So it's abundant and you can do anything you want with it. So nature can flex with it. Also, people that have science and able to create life can do anything with it. So the likelihood of life that we find elsewhere being carbon-based is extremely high. It's just logic. We're going right.
Yeah, I was going to comment too on multiculturalism. I wonder if the ETs are behind some of these social changes, not just our technological change, because there's an encouragement of multiculturalism. Like in all Western countries, we have a lot of influx of multiculturalism. And, you know, maybe the people didn't vote for this, but maybe it's a process by which we're going to be introduced to ETs in the future. So it's better as a gradual thing. I think they look at like 1,000 years at a time in terms of social changes, and humans might tend to look at a 5-year plan or until the next election or whatever. So maybe over a long period of time, multiculturalism is part of an ET agenda behind the scenes to just get us aware of all these differences, because there's more and more differences to come once open contact is made with ETs. I mean, it's just speculation on my part.
Yeah, I think, Brian, there's a lot of evidence, like in some of the stories, especially stories like in mythology and even philosophy, of interactions with peoples from the sky. You know, Elohim, you know, those who came from the sky, that's what it's meaning in Hebrew. You have the Mahabharata, for example, and some of the stories in where I am in Thailand, where you have people with magic or high technology that come down from the sky and help humans and interact and do different things. So, and even if you look at the great prophets, right, they all have a similar message, similar to what is brought to a lot of the contactees. In fact, like, you know, build love and harmony and unicity. The great prophets were given the message from an entity from the sky, typically, a message of love, message of I think there's good circumstantial evidence, the massive circumstantial evidence, that there's been guidance for a long time in different areas of the world, and they became religions and kind of interpreted in different ways. But in some philosophy, like South America and some in Africa and other places, where you still have a very strong story of actual people, flesh and blood, having come, done stuff, created life, interacted, whatever, and then the story they'll come back when we're ready. So it's not just the story of, you know, the Muslim story or the Christian story and the Buddhist stories that are there. Some others are very direct in you know, yeah, no, ETs will be back. They were not from Earth. They came here from elsewhere. And they did things. So they are ETs. And in the images, they often have, you know, shapes, since they are humanoid. They have different shades of skin, different, you know, arms, and sometimes they have a tail and different things like that in stories. And in the imagery that are documented over the word of mouth mostly. So interactions, I think is all into our past, and that means to me, because of the way the messaging happened, and kind of like, okay, go out, go forth and spread the word, like from the prophets, for example, that seems to me like an intentional plan over, like you said, over a number of years, or like 1,000 to 1,000 years, even before that, with more contact and activity now than ever.
Well, even the University of Galacticus was started because of contact, correct? With Betelgeuse?
Yeah, I guess the most of the inspiration came from Betelgeuse. This is an entity channeled through Aspen, who's an American woman in Texas. But yeah, most of the ideas were like higher realm from this entity, Betelgeuse. And this is on our launch videos as well. We did on our website, there's 3 launch videos, mainly me interviewing Betelgeuse. But it reminds me too, also in in Buddhist cosmology, the Buddha described 31 planes of existence with beings above the human, like human is one level, and then there's 6 levels of heaven beyond that in the central sphere. And the first is, it's a realm of flying things. So in Buddhist cosmology, you know, Buddhists understand that there's things that fly around, devas, meaning heavenly beings that fly around above us. So it's, in Buddhist countries, it's not surprising to see. I've actually met a couple of monks who said they've actually seen flying saucers in Thailand when they were, you know, on retreat there, you know, with other monks. So it's part of Buddhist cosmology. But yeah, what you're talking about, the recent upswing, like since 1947 particularly, we see so much more happening. And of course, there's various explanations for that. Maybe, of course, we're getting more technological, we're getting more dangerous with the atomic bomb. But certainly there's a lot more. So justification for us getting prepared, it's all about preparing and having the contemplation of diplomatic contact with ETs. This is what so we're leading the vanguard here.
Yeah, and they are preparing us, but all those appearances, just UAP appearances, you know, the legit ones, being more frequent, it creates conversation. What are they? Where are they? Who was in there? Blah, blah, blah. That's helpful. So all they have to do is kind of play around with drones, because that's how I imagine it. That's how I would do it. Just send drones that are doing mysterious and that beyond the physics that we can understand, and eventually, like, there's stories emerge. And there's curiosity, and it creates conversation. Conversation creates ideas, and organizations emerge, and so on that want to study them. They're playing around, but they definitely seem to have a plan, and the contactees will tell you that too. Tanys, you are a contactee. Since you're here, maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's hear this.
Yeah, so my personal experience was one night I had pain in my chest, and I had gone to see the doctor about it. And I was supposed to go for a mammogram and all of this. And in the meantime, I had asked for some help, being spiritual. And I one night woke up to a suction feeling right where the pain had been. And I woke up to see an ET standing beside me. And he looked startled that I saw him. And I looked startled because I wasn't expecting him. And then he disappeared. But I did not have any pain in that area anymore after that experience. And so for me, it's certainly not, they're certainly benevolent in that way. They certainly helped with whatever that was a problem. So that was my first experience with them. And I've certainly had numerous telepathic communications. I work with them in my practice, and they certainly guide things like etheric surgery and healings and stuff like that. So for me, they're definitely benevolent, you know, in nature, and they're here to help us and guide us. So that's one of my experiences.
I want to ask, what did it look like, the ET?
It was very light. It was quite see-through because it wasn't our dimension. And so for me, when I see it, was quite see-through looking. It, I think, was my guide Rygus, who is Arcturian. And so he's about 5 to 6 feet tall, I guess. Yeah, they have a fairly large head here. So it's kind of a typical sort of ET, but slightly different. You can see the pronounced spot for where their brain may be. I'm not, up on Arcturian biology, but it looks as though it would be a large cranium in that sense. And much thinner, like not a lot of body fat, very lean, 3 fingers and a thumb instead of 4 and a thumb. That was my experience anyway. And I guess the other one that would be a very diplomatic one would be the time that I was in my backyard with some friends, and I heard telepathically, "May we speak with you, please?" And I turned around to see a praying mantis, not in the physical. This is, again, that higher vibration, so see-through style, just mostly energy, standing right outside the door. And so he was quite tall, 7 or 8 feet tall, looked much like a praying mantis. And so I walked over and I'm like, yes. And he's like, we understand that you are a Galactic Ambassador. I said, yeah, apparently, yes. And he said, we would like to have you pass on a message, please. And I said, okay, please inform people that not all insectoids are malevolent. We are here for your ascension process and for your support, or to support you. And I said, thank you. And he did this, thank you, and wandered off to 5 more at the back of my yard. Very similar. So apparently there was a delegation that came down to see me for that reason. So I think those kinds of diplomatic meetings are happening much more in terms of with people that are open to that and are involved in sort of the galactic world. So that's been my experience with them.
That's amazing to meet a mantis. Like, I have the highest respect for mantis. They seem to be way up there, like the architects of the plans that the Greys work out. Even Richard Dolan said they may be the highest intelligence that humanity's yet encountered.
Mm-hmm.
I've never met a mantid.
It's intimidating. You know, I can certainly see why it has not been brought out in the general public in a big way until they get us more used to it, because you know, they're very different looking. Some of the other species or races are not as different. Like the Arcturians, yeah, they look like very, very skinny, but they're at least humanoid in like 2 arms, 2 legs kind of thing, biped. Whereas these are very different. It's like having giant insects there. And so that, you know, for people that have an uncomfortableness around insects, even here on Earth, that would be quite intimidating.
Yeah, Hollywood has not been very helpful with the insect fear.
Oh yeah, they can really
just generally like movies about insects. Like, you know, I think of a few that are very creepy. So some people are just afraid of insects generally. So it doesn't really help. It's not really anybody's fault.
No. But these are the kind of stereotypes we have to get past when we're looking at ET diplomacy. Right.
Here's an interesting thought. This is like diplomatic thought, because there's all these ambassadors like yourself that are declared by, not officially by people from Earth, but declared ambassadors by NIH, right? Not humans. And there's many of them. Like, we know of a number of them ourselves, and we're an organization that's not that old. So around the world in different languages, there must be hundreds.
I'm sure. More. Probably thousands.
And they all have, like, you know, being given messages as ambassadors like this. And it makes me wonder, as we move forward in our own civilization, where we are gradually decentralizing because power is more in the hands of the people through, you know, internet, and like we can do direct democracy if we wanted to, for example, and these kind of things. And so and we're thinking about not dismantling, but changing from a centralized type of systems to a more decentralized, more personalized kind of system, where we work on it right now. And I wonder, advanced civilizations, whether or not if they are decentralized, I mean, they should be in some way. And that's kind of having diplomats like yourself and many others is a way to tap into that decentralization by providing seeds and messages in multiple areas, and having that disseminate naturally according to the flow and ebb and different things, and having things kind of, you know, come out of that as outcomes. If their civilization are more similar to that in some way. Where the population is directly engaged, you know, in all sorts of things, not just some diplomat in an ivory tower somewhere that's protected. And it does show, like, so that's a speculation. It could be, but them doing a lot of it this way, you know, sending messages through the population, right? it really shows a deep respect to the culture and the population itself, because a lot of stories would be like, bring me to your leader, right? Like, you know, typically Hollywood style, bring me to the leader. And that's kind of a traditional type of thinking. But in modern thinking, that's not really optimal, because the leader has, you know, bias, ulterior motives, often power hungriness, and there's all sorts of problems that can emerge. And the population doesn't really want to have hidden agenda information where we don't get all the information, because that's the whole reason behind the disclosure movement. Governments have been doing things and then we don't know about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think they're very much aware of the dynamics of the population and where we're heading and what we need. And it's another form of guidance, but they're not talking. It doesn't seem like they're talking much to our leaders. They're talking to our real leaders, being people in the population that are teachers.
Mhm.
And the information bubbles out and into the population in a very interesting way. So I have a lot of thought to that. It's more questions than answers, but it's grassroots.
Well, and I find it interesting because they do still have a governance system galactically, right? The Galactic Federation it's a diplomatic, like our UN, but intergalactic, right? And so it's got representatives from all the different star systems and the planets, and you know, the different councils meet as well that have different you know, projects that they work on and all of that stuff. So in terms of organizationally, they do still have structure in how they go about. So they do make those kinds of guidelines, and that the Galactic Federation has been watching over sort of our evolution here on Earth in the ships, and making those kind of calculated decisions about, you know, when do we come down and make it an official disclosure, or you know, or how do we do that? And so they have definitely had committees working on that.
Yeah, I agree that there must be a hierarchical structure. That's always been a big interest of mine, that there has to be some organization. But I think Sylvain's right. Instead of going to like the president of the United States, they're working through the population. Obviously, with this contact for decades, they're going through ordinary people. And part of the objectives of University of Galactus is to have various contact modalities like remote viewing or doing guided meditations to kind of visualize the mantids or visualize the grays or try to make some contact. So some like you, Tanys, would be great, you know, to have questions for the mantids or get you to meditate on the mantids, or you could give some advice to University of Galactus from the mantids, because that's part of what we like to do, is basically have a relationship with the ETs, anyone who wants to help us, because we're, in a sense, we're trying to be their boots on the ground. We're hooking into a process that already exists, that they're already doing for many decades or centuries. And we're just raising awareness that the process is there. We're trying to facilitate it. So we're a facilitator. So anyone who has some ability to have a contact modality with ETs is exactly who we want to work with. So we should do an episode with you, Tanys, contacting with the mantids. Yes.
Let me have a few chats with them, and
Yes, we should do that.
I have a question for you, Brian, for the university. What is the university's plan post-contact? Like, if, let's say, the alliance succeeds, right, builds the embassy, right, and we're well on our way to actually achieve that 2030-ish opening, the embassy officially recognized and so on. Okay, so that's built. ETC, hopefully, that, okay, we want to make that first contact, and they do, right? Either at the embassy or whatever way is possible. That everybody, the whole world now is aware, okay, that there's one or several civilizations that are interacting with us openly and officially. What is the role of the university past that? Like, what do you see as the university's role after this nascent moment and post contact?
Well, the first thing we'd say is, I told you so. I told you so. We told you this was coming. But after that, I think we would want to have more of a diplomatic role of educating people, because calming people down or encouraging people or helping them with this transition. So it'd be a huge transition for a lot of ordinary people. Billions of people don't even think about space, to confront the very nature of reality and everything. So I think it'd be a process of helping along our fellow man adapt to this. We'd have to adapt to it ourselves. I think one of the things that would happen with full disclosure would be the revelation of human history, like our history in recent centuries in ancient history. That would probably be mind-blowing to everyone. What? Our real history? Like, we've been lied to about our real history. That's because that identifies people, who they are. They identify with their history or their clan or where they came from, their European roots or whatever it is. So there'd be a lot of adjusting to do. So we would probably want to help others adjust.
If I might share a vision that I had as you asked the question, Sylvain, was actually ETs teaching your classes.
Nice.
Like hand in hand with human counterparts to create that unity feeling, and for education purposes. So to learn about their different races, having them be in front of the classes to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, it'd be the next level, having them teach. Yeah, it'd be the next level of the whole relationship. Just furthering that relation until it comes like, heaven, earth, and man gets united. So it becomes like one world. The higher realm with the human realm becomes one world. So we have a more advanced humanity, sort of a whole new humanity. It'd be like a new earth in a sense.
Well, the Federation has already done that on many other planets, and that's sort of how they do start to integrate. So that is, I think, that might be part of your plan that they're filling me in on.
Yeah, I think they've already done that. And I think they're kind of waiting. They want Earth to be included in this Federation of Planets, or whatever it's called, Galactic Federation. And they want Earth in on it. And it's kind of necessary. Like, I think we're one of a bunch of planets, so we can't be allowed to go retrograde, because it could actually harm others for some cosmic reason. And we can't go retrograde. They got to get us on board. So I think they want us to be part of this Federation.
Yeah, they do. I was, it's funny because for the Alliance, for our conference last year, I had asked them if they would come down and be, like a representative would come down and be with me on Zoom, or we'd set them up on Zoom or something. And then I just forgot about it, because that's what I do. I go about doing my regular day. Next thing I knew, one day I was like I was being called, like, so I get into like a meditative state, and I'm all of a sudden really tired. So I tune in, and I find myself in like a conference room with the Pleiadians and the Arcturians, and they're like going back and forth about whether we're ready. Apparently it was the Humanity Council. And so I was being called to say, like, are you ready? And I'm like, well, I'm ready. I don't know about the rest of them, but I'm ready. I'm like, don't go just by my thing. You need to talk to all the ambassadors down there to see if everybody's ready. And so they are having conversations about it. The Arcturians were very, we have a process. We've done this before. There's a reason for the process. And the Pleiadians were like, but we really want to go and help. We really want to help. So that was my experience with it.
Very good. Very good.
They didn't come on screen. They didn't feel it was time yet. Obviously, the Arcturians won the argument.
We're doing another conference at the end of the year, right, Tanys?
Yeah, I'll have to have a chat.
Just let you know.
I think it's supposed to be 26, 27 is when they're coming down. So if everything goes as planned, it's somewhere in that range for a more physical, kind of widespread.
Well, I hope that means there won't be a World War III prior to that then, or they'll stave it off.
Well, I think they've already like stopped some stuff over history in terms of
I hope
that
so.
sort of thing. So I think they are on point about that and watching the affairs. That's why there's so many of them in the skies around right now.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, they're watching everything.
My feeling is that they're preventing accidents, let's call them. Like some nuclear silos. You have some stories where there was some malfunctions. and are shutting things down, or people like individuals that would cause a cataclysm, they can stop some of those things.
Yeah.
My feeling is that if as a humanity we decide we want to kill each other, I don't think they'll stop us. Like if it's like kind of like this scenario, like the worst case scenario where like two massive groups of people decide, okay, we're going to nuke each other. My feeling is that they'll just say, okay, that's the decision of the humanity. Like they won't interfere then, which is a super sad thought to have, by the way.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're anywhere near that scenario, mind you.
No.
But otherwise, like I don't think they'll allow a single individual with a red button, so to speak, make it the end of us. Like that would be. I mean, can you imagine? Like you're interacting for thousands of years with civilization, waiting for a moment, and then this one person, one nuts or sick person ruins it all. So no,
that's why I don't think, I don't think they're going to allow that to happen for that reason.
To happen, because that would be just so such an unfortunate thing. It's not a decision of the population, just one person for whatever reason.
The population never want these wars. It's always forces behind. The population has better things to do than I want to go to another continent and leave my family and the farm behind so I can fight in this war for some noble, vague cause. You know, people don't think that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it still happens in areas where there's not a lot of information circulation, like some areas of Africa in particular. There's still a lot of let's call them like old wars for old reasons, right? People get enrolled into fear, into what we were talking about initially, because it's like in a lot of communities there, they still only have radio.
Right.
There's not enough internet. There's like internet penetration is maybe 20% in some of the countries there. So you still have control of information and therefore control of the fear by people in power. And like the conflict in Ethiopia, northern Ethiopia, which had like 100,000 people killed in the last 10 years. These are soldiers being killed, not the civilians. These are areas that where the population opposite to your point, Brian, are starving sometimes. They don't have access to good information, so they can be convinced of the other being evil much more easily. And then you still have those conflicts. But otherwise, like within a well-informed population that interacts a lot with other nations, like internet populations, people don't want to go to war against another people just if the dear leader or the politicians say so. No, convince me, because I don't want to go.
It's true what you said about the causes of war. It's the control of information that get manufactured. Like to tell people, those people, the river, they're evil, they're trying to harm us. We have to kill them first. That's how you get wars going through those kind of lies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all based on fear. All of it's based on fear. So, you know, the unifying force is always that of love. It's when we make decisions out of love instead of out of fear, we take giant strides forward.
And we can get there.
Yeah.
We can get people out of fear through information.
I think you're right about what you said about the internet too. People just aren't going to go for World War III because we got more information. We're not buying it, you know, because we know more than we did before the internet.
Oh, we're as fragmented as we've ever been, which in that perspective is good, because you can't get the whole population to agree on anything.
That's right.
So you can't get them to agree to go to war or anything else. It's like, no.
Yeah.
So let's bring technology to those areas, which is an ongoing process. There's a lot of internet penetration increases in Africa and some of these underserved areas. By 2030, we should have 100% internet coverage over the whole planet, which means information flows freely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And therefore,
more people will see our videos. We get our message out.
Exactly.
They get to see YouTube, which is sometimes used as a terrible thing, or Facebook, because there's a lot of misinformation there. But they get to see the other colors, the other races, the other culture. They start how the others are. They associate. Now they have business partners or friends that are in a different country. They get to ask questions and understand. That's the power of that. Like that reduces that fear that fear complex and that knee-jerk reaction of having to fight. If you know the opponent, because he's a friend, even if it's online, it's like, wait, like these people are not like that because I know Bob. Bob's not like that. Creates doubt. So technology alongside awareness and consciousness allows people to see the world differently and make their own minds about things, so they can't be controlled as much, and that is super important.
Good
Well, I
point.
think that's one of the things that COVID really brought to us, right? Was this ability to really, it pushed us all to communicate with people in different parts of the world that we might not have done, but everybody was in the same boat. So you reach out and you have interactions with people that you might not have made the effort to do.
It's a good
We were
point.
very isolated in our silos, right? In our cities and towns, and all of a sudden we have Zoom that's booming and everybody's on Zoom and you're having all these interactions with people.
So true.
So I think that was definitely part of the progress part of COVID. In terms,
yeah, maybe one of the ETs had a hand in that. Maybe as part of our development, you know. So there's good and bad sides of these things.
Yeah, I mean, there's always good and bad. So it certainly was not necessarily an overall positive experience, but there are positive things that came out of it, I think. In terms of,
yeah, good stuff.
Well, I thank you both for having this conversation. It was an honor to be able to be with you tonight to facilitate this, and we're wishing all of you a beautiful evening and a beautiful day, depending on where you are, and we're sending you all lots of love. Thank you.
It's my first time doing a video with Sylvain. I was really happy to do that because Tanys and I have gotten together before, so it's great connecting with you, Sylvain, doing our first video together.
Excellent. Yeah. And hopefully this video is going to go out and bring new ideas, new mindsets that can be shared. And we wish both of our projects, which are very tied together, to grow through these interactions. And hey, let's build the embassy inside our hearts and the physical building as well. Let's do both of those things.
Because we are all one.
We are all one.
Yes. Okay.